All right. So again, Spencer, thank you very much for setting aside some time here on this Tuesday evening to meet up with me so we can get a little more of an in-depth breakdown for, I know myself, I don't know the MLB draft as much as I would like. And I know there's probably some listeners out there that would. But before we kind of get into that, I wanted to kind of let you have the floor to give yourself a little introduction, explain, what you do with AZ Snake Pit, how long you've been there, how long you've been a fan of the Diamondbacks. And then even, maybe your favorite, material and favorite Diamondback of all time.
Yeah. Well, I'm Spencer O'Gara. I currently live in Central Ohio, but I grew up in Phoenix. My family moved there from Chicago in 2002. I was there until I graduated high school, in 2012. Then I spent 6 years in Missouri before I moved here. I've been a fan of the Diamondbacks since 2001, like almost everybody. My mom's parents lived in Arizona, so we watched the World Series, and then we moved there the next year, so it was kind of inevitable just be the fan. I've been covering the Diamondbacks in a public fashion, I guess, since 2021. In that offseason, I made a prospect series of articles about the top prospects in the system and where I thought they would be in 3 to 5 years. I was not very good at projections, but I got Corbin Carroll right. And then for the 2022 season, they brought me on as a regular recapper. So now I recap on Friday nights. Each of those games, the article that recaps the game will be written by me. If you read the Snake Bites in the morning on Tuesdays, those are compiled by me. And then I just kind of fill in where necessary, or if I have a topic that strikes my fancy and I want to write about it, I'll make an article.
Heck yeah. So that's awesome. Say, honestly, I recently myself, I created a account on Snake Pit, and I always have an issue where I'll read comments online all the time, and I go to make a comment, and then it's like, oh, make an account. I always forget to. But for years I've always seen your recaps on there, and I believe I actually do remember watching, or at least maybe not watching, when I was looking up some of the prospects, kind of trying to get a little bit of a deep dive. I believe even that. I'm 90% sure I looked up your exact one about Corbin Carroll, because that's when I remember when we were setting up this whole meeting. I was like, Spencer, that name sounds really familiar. I'm not just obviously with Snake Pit recently, but I was like, I feel like I remember hearing about that name 4 or 5 years ago on some kind of article. So it's kind of a cool full circle moment. Not gonna lie.
I liked that article. I really like prospects and prospecting in baseball, but like I said, I'm not a scout. I was not good when I played baseball, and I fell out of the fandom for a while. So I'm not particularly good at it, but I'm good at finding patterns, and I'm good at understanding how people make their decisions. So while I might not be able to tell you which 16-year-old kid is going to be the number 1 draft pick 2 years down the line, I'm pretty good at once I've seen all the data and the mock drafts and read about the guys and watched them play college ball, then you can start to get into, who's going to get drafted? And once they're in the system, I like to think, okay, this guy's got potential. He might flame out, but 3 or 4 years down the line, we might be looking at a Corbin Carroll.
Heck yeah. We've seen plenty of the so-called experts when it comes to, especially base drafting in any sport can kind of be a crapshoot, but especially with baseball, it's one of those where you don't really see the players you draft will really necessarily pay off. The Paul Skeens and the Jackson Holidays, those guys that come up in a year or two, very rare for baseball. It doesn't really happen too often. So, even most of the time they get it incorrect. So I feel like all you can do, looking at patterns, that's kind of the thing I've even been trying to get into more stats and noticing. It's all patterns. If you can pick up patterns, you can kind of notice a little bit, notice more things. That's just all life is, and sports in general. So that, makes a lot of sense with the why you got into it. Same. I love baseball. I could never throw really hard, but pitching is my favorite thing about baseball. I love just watching how guys pitch, but I could no way, shape, or form be a pitching coach because I'm just not skilled enough to, know what I'm talking about when it comes to that. But kind of get back on topic a little bit. As I said, we're here to talk about the MLB draft. So the MLB draft will be taking place on July 14th at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time here. I forgot to look up exactly where it was being held. Do you by chance know what city it's in this year?
Ooh, I don't.
Is it the same city they do the All-Star game? Because I believe last year they did it in Seattle too.
It might be. So it might be in Arlington.
Which would be sense.
Draft location. Let's find out. Yep, Fort Worth,
Look at-
Texas. It must always be. Must just be in the same city, which makes sense. I guess they've combined that week and weekend work things, which is kind of obnoxious for anyone who has to work it, I imagine. But
yeah, dude, no kidding. That would not be a fun weekend, especially like not even the planning. I would hate to be a schedule planner for any MLB event.
no.
That would be a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. But yeah, so 2 p.m. July 14th in Arlington. For, kind of like I was saying, I know the MLB draft a little bit, but it's definitely changed over the last few years. From anywhere between less rounds in the previous years, I know like before 2020, you had like 15, 20 rounds. A lot of guys got drafted. To now, the draft, it's no longer the worst team record-wise. The number one pick is actually decided by a lottery, kind of an attempt to discourage tanking, looking at you A's, and try to keep teams a little more competitive. For those fans out there that might not be as familiar with the draft like myself, can you give a breakdown on some of the basics on exactly how the draft works?
Yeah. So the draft is 20 total rounds. It's still, I believe, the largest draft in North America. And that's down from about 40. So half the players, essentially. And there's sandwich rounds or compensation rounds. They have all sorts of different names for them.
Okay.
Those are small market teams will get extra picks between the first and second or second and third round. Kind of alternates year to year.
I believe we got one of those for Goldie in the Goldie trade.
No, this is based on market value of your team.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
Then there's compensation. Well, yes, actually, I'm sorry, though. You are right. We traded for Paul Goldschmidt. Forgot about that part of the deal. That ended up being, I believe, Tommy Henry or Dominic Fletcher, depending on how you want to look at it. They were back to back.
Yes.
And then there's also compensation picks. We got those for Patrick Corbin and AJ Pollock after the 2018 season, so in the 2019 draft, which is the same draft that we got the one for Goldschmidt. Those they have all sorts of technical rules that I don't fully comprehend and understand, but basically the size of your team, if you offer a qualifying offer to your free agent who then signs with another team, depends on where they sign, how much they sign for, how long the contract is sometimes, and you'll slide into various locations, and basically you'll take that team's first round or third round draft pick, whichever one they lost for signing that guy. Those ones are pretty common knowledge because they're attached to free agents, so they're generally understood by fans, even if they don't understand exactly who gets taken. And then the most recent additions to it are the prospect incentive, the PPI picks, prospect promotion incentive picks, which are right after the first round. We have one this year thanks to Corbin Carroll. He was a top 100 prospect on the necessary lists, which is two of either, I believe it's ESPN, MLB Pipeline, and Baseball America. Those are the three lists. You have to be on two of them as a prospect in the top 100 that they deem at the beginning of the season, I believe. Once the season starts, I think that list is locked. And then if you are Rookie of the Year at the end of the year, you, as the player, get a bunch of benefits, but the team gets the benefit for having promoted you. You don't necessarily have to be on the opening day roster. There's about a 2-week window that still works for it. But generally speaking, you're going to be on the opening day roster, and you will then qualify. So this year, Paul Skeens is quickly becoming a front runner for Rookie of the Year. He is on the necessary lists. However, he did not debut early enough. So the Pirates will not get that pick for him should he win. But I believe his counterpart, Jared Jones, should he win, would qualify. I'm not 100% that he was on the necessary lists, but he's certainly a good enough prospect. He would be close. So we have that one of those this year. And of course, the Orioles also have one this year because Gunnar Henderson was in that same boat. Last year, Julio Rodriguez had earned one for the Mariners. So in the first couple of years of having this, there have been significant draft compensation for the rookies, which is excellent. In the draft with those rounds, obviously your best players are going to go generally in the first few rounds. And then baseball has weird bonus pools, so sometimes you'll see a guy taken in like the 11th round that's actually quite good as well. We'll get into the finances. That's where that one kind of plays in. And you can be drafted if you're a graduate from high school, So anyone who's 17, 18, or 19 coming out of high school, they can qualify for the draft. Or most college draftees are going to be coming out of their junior year of college. Some can qualify in their sophomore year. Don't ask me why or how. I don't understand that part of it.
That whole part of college sports can just always be a little weird, not gonna lie.
It was never something that my family was into. I was never athletic enough to play. It just never made sense. But generally, your college guys are going to be about 21 years old. And then, of course, any senior in college can also qualify because they're above that age grouping. Seniors have the least bargaining power when it comes to signing with their team, just because they have no option to go back to college, whereas a junior would, especially a sophomore. And high schoolers tend to have the most because they're being courted by giant systems right now that can now give them money because of name, image, and likeness. And more you're seeing a shift to college guys. And generally, when you are talking about a college guy, it's going to be some version of a junior, 21-year-old.
I believe Tommy Henry was drafted as a junior, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that 2019 draft for us was just massive with the major league talent. We got Dre Jamison, Ryan Nelson, Tommy Henry, Corbin Carroll, Blaze Alexander was 2019, I think. Just so many players that are currently affecting the team. And they were all juniors. One thing to note is COVID kind of made that change. The 2019 draft was massive. It was 40 rounds. The 2021 draft was 20 rounds. Obviously, the COVID year is different. That was only 5 rounds. We actually did quite well in that year as well. But that was only 5 years. So since COVID, the drafts have been a little strange. Not just fewer rounds, but you've got guys who their main points of development as young players were interrupted by COVID. So last year, you probably have all heard that it was just a phenomenal draft. We got Tommy Troy in the middle of the first round. He probably would have been a top 10, top 6 pick in a normal draft. Now, of course, he's injured. Not everybody makes it. That's just the way it goes. But it was a very, very strong draft. It would be great to have all of our draft picks this year, 365 days ago, because it was a great draft. That is because the 2020, they were high school seniors in 2020. Almost no high schoolers got drafted in 2020. You just didn't know what you were getting. You want to go with the college guys. Was that a good plan? Not for everybody. Look at Spencer Torkelson with the Tigers.
Yes, I love me some ASU just for Spenny T, but yeah, he's not really panning out as I imagine a lot of baseball fans expected him to.
Yeah, he was definitely the right choice at the time, given what we knew. But retrospect, hindsight's 2020 and all that. So he's not looking great right now. But so that's what caused last year's draft to just be overflowing with excellent talent. Because Tommy Troy probably would have been drafted as a high schooler if it were a normal year for a draft. He may have signed. He might not be in our system. But in addition to that, you had the new high schoolers coming out who were also talented. So it just lengthened that top tier of talent.
I feel like over the last few years, especially we've seen a lot of high school. I mean, I was still genuinely surprised that we were able to, like you're talking about, some of these guys that can say no out of high school because they're, promised to go to some of these bigger schools. Jordan Lawler, taking him and actually getting him to sign and, not decommit, but not go to Vanderbilt was huge. I was genuinely not expecting that.
It was massive. The team would have had a lot of egg on their face if they didn't sign him, but it was still massive to get a talent like that at 6 overall. He should have gone or higher based on talent, and to get him to sign, that was excellent. You will also hear that because last year was so good, this year is a weaker draft. That's partially just a comparison because there are fewer guys who fall into that COVID window. This is the closest draft we've had since 2020 to a normal draft, pre-COVID pandemic draft. In general, it's also just weaker because there's a lot of guys who are in college who are very similar to each other as players, but none of them really stand out. They all have some glaring error or flaws, or they just don't quite have the tools that you would like to see for a first round talent. So the tip top of the draft, still excellent. My Ohio teams here that I get to watch and live vicariously through my friends and family, they're going to be great with their 1 and 2 overall picks. They've got some solid guys coming.
Yeah, I forgot both Ohio teams got what is it? Guardians #1, Reds #2.
Yep.
That's crazy, man.
Odds were astronomical of that happening. So it's pretty fun here right now. Especially since Guardians are doing really well, so everybody's excited about that. The Reds were expected to and are very injured and suspended for drugs and everything. So the draft is very much on people's minds.
Understandable.
So the tip top of the draft is still, they're still Jordan Lawler level talents. What we'll be picking for at 23 and with all of our cluster of picks right there at the end of the first round, still very talented guys. We should be very excited to get them in the system. They will still show up on top prospect lists. They'll be in the top 10 most likely. But they'll come with some flaws. There will be development involved, which is good. That generally, Paul Goldschmidt was, an 8th round pick, I think? Your best talents don't always come from the top that first round. It's not like other sports.
Yeah, I believe even, I don't have it in front of me because I was trying to get you had an excellent spreadsheet that had just the entire history of, genuinely, for anybody that's, listening or whatever, it has impressed the hell out of me. I was jaw open, all this information just right here for the taking, very impressive stuff. And noticed a lot of names that were in the red, made it to the MLB, and even names where I'm might not be a Hall of Famer type name, but that's definitely a name you remember, a name that you pop up on a Baseball Reference years ago, and you're got them in the 14th round, there's some pretty good talent in those later rounds.
Yeah. Pre the draft bonus pool era, which is over a decade old now, maybe 15 years old. You could kind of take anybody anywhere and give them whatever amount of money it was going to cost to sign them. So you would see a lot more I don't know if anybody really understands or knows St. Louis and their Cardinal Devil magic that they talk about, but they used to get guys who came out of the 32nd round who ended up being a Josh Rojas type or a Geraldo Perdomo type. And it was Cardinal Devil magic. And in reality, all they were doing was they were agreeing to terms with a kid, and they knew he had a lot of talent. They just took him late in the rounds. The Excel doc, the Google Cells doc that referenced is actually in my articles from last year's draft on the Snake Pit. You can go use it. It'll give you view access only, so you don't mess up any of my formulas. Yeah. I have done that. It costs a lot of work. But
don't want to redo that.
Yeah, I update it every 3 to 6 months, I guess I'd say. It's just based on WAR, and WAR isn't really something you want to update every month just because it's so fluctuate during a season, or it fluctuates so much during a season. But it's there. It's fascinating to look at. There's totals based on scouting director. There's each individual year. I started it for fun, and now I use it constantly. It's just interesting.
I think I'm definitely have to be going back to that to reference that, because that'll definitely be something fun to kind of keep up some tabs on, especially now that, imagine I'm definitely more familiar with, the Corbin, the 2019 draft and beyond, because that's really when I started even, D-backs were kind of in those years. Paul Goldschmidt was gone. There really wasn't Cattell was the face of the team. We didn't have Zach Gallen really in the ace that he was. So there wasn't really that person for fans to grab onto. So it was that hope of, I'm just going to watch the draft and look for players that I'm excited. And it'll be kind of fun as the years go on to kind of use that doc, look back at it and be how have, the D-backs improved their drafting strategy? Is Corbin Carroll their, lone superstar they actually drafted, and they kind of go back down to some of the mid tiers, but it'll be fun to, kind of keep us updated as the years go on, I should say.
Yeah. And then the other new thing about the draft is no longer the first time for baseball, but baseball is in the first iteration of a lottery, which is new to a lot of us, not necessarily new to other sports fans. It was new to me when it got added. I don't follow a lot of other sports in the same way that I follow baseball. So the lottery is 6 deep. And every team that misses out on the playoffs gets a shot at the lottery. So if you make it into the playoffs, you have no chance of picking your top 6. You will pick at the end of the first round. Everybody who goes in gets their odds based on their record. Obviously, the worst record gets the best odds. It's actually the 3 worst records get the same odds. And they'll pick, and then there are rules on picking in the lottery. So small market teams like the Diamondbacks, whether or not you believe that Phoenix is a small market, can pick in the lottery 2 years in a row. After that, they cannot. They don't qualify for it. A large market team, like, say, the Dodgers, should they ever miss the playoffs again, God willing, they would only be allowed to pick in the lottery once before they get pushed out of it. And if you're pushed out of it, you can't pick higher than 10th. So a silver lining to if our season does not end on a better note than it has started is we will be qualifying for the lottery, but the A's won't qualify anymore. I believe there's a couple of teams that aren't going to qualify for the lottery.
Probably like the Marlins, White Sox.
Yeah, someone, the dregs of the league, basically, are the ones that won't be able to pick in the lottery, which theoretically boosts Arizona's odds. The odds of us getting a lottery pick, not great, but our draft position could actually boost up a couple of spots if we were to completely fall apart like we did without Marino last year.
Yes, that's actually like really good to know. I did not know because I know they put the draft lottery kind of in place, just like I was saying before, to kind of like deter teams from trying to tank. Because, you know, back in the day, you could guarantee yourself an actual draft position depending on your record, like how much you lose. Where I don't think the number one or the bottom 3 teams have gotten any of the top 2 picks in the last 2 lotteries, if I'm not mistaken. Because I think the first year they did it was with the Pirates, correct? I think the Pirates got the first lottery, or did the Guardians or the Guard like?
No,
did you say the Guardians?
The Pirates
were the
one, first or second. I'm pretty sure they were the first lottery. They were.
Yeah, I think they were the
first because Drew Jones was a non-lottery pick.
That's right.
Drew
correct.
Jones
Yes.
was 2022. So 23 was the first lottery. And then last year, the Twins were the beneficiary of the lottery. They were outside of it, and they got one of the picks. This year, the Reds and the Guardians, I believe, were both outside the lottery. They were not one of the 6 worst teams. And they jumped into the top 2 spots. They got very lucky.
Yes, I think that's a nice rule or stipulation they added to where, you know, hey, it's hard to even get, you know, a guaranteed spot, but it's like, we're not going to let you continue to suck for years so you can keep stockpiling top 6 picks. Like, we're not going to let any guaranteed spots happen. That's really good to know that they're kind of like trying to do what they can to balance out, you know, the off the field product. Because, like, you know, there's only so much you can do on the field. Like, sometimes it might be a little unfair. I totally it sucks the Dodgers spend all that money, but sometimes a good organization is a good organization just because they run really well. You can only hate it so much.
If
but
we could definitely do an organization, I'd want us to emulate the Dodgers. They're
100%.
Hundreds of millions of dollars to just throw away. They've got the best development in baseball. It's fantastic. But sometimes you're a team like the Padres and you spend a lot of money, you have good young guys, and you lose all but one of your one-run games in the season, and you miss out on the playoffs. You deserve the lottery if it's there for you. Yeah,
so I definitely think that it is really cool that they added that in there. But now that you've definitely broken down a lot of like the meat and potatoes and some of the basics and kind of gone to some of the new additions and things with the draft, I want to go into one of the more if you could break down some of the more like financial side. I know you mentioned it earlier with like the bonus pool and all that. I was a little curious exactly how the bonus pool worked and how, like, you know, some teams tend to strategize where, we're going to save some money for a later round because we think that if we give this kid that's a high schooler, like you brought up earlier, a high schooler that might not say yes to us, but if we take him at a later round, give him a bigger bonus, maybe we can kind of, you know, attempt him to sign with us. So kind of break that down a little bit and to how the bonus pool works.
Yeah. So every pick within the first 10 rounds gets allocated an amount of money. MLB chooses it. It's generally goes up a little bit every year. Kind of like your salary. If you have a good company, they'll just give you a standard of living raise kind of regardless. So that every pick in the first 10 rounds gets that. Regardless of if it's in a real round or a sandwich round or whatever, extra picks help you because your bonus pool is then larger. You have the more picks. You can spread that money out however you want. So it can all be spent within the first 10 rounds, or you can save some of it for those later rounds, the 11th round, like I was talking, anything that you would like to do there. The big stipulation with it is if you do not sign one of the guys you take in the top 10 rounds, you lose the value of that bonus pick or of that pick from your entire bonus. And teams are allowed to outspend their pool by 5%, just in case everybody asks for a little bit more than what they expected. You're allowed to, like, you have that leeway, but that percentage goes down if you lose one of those picks as well. So had we not signed Jordan Lawler in 2021, we would have lost a huge portion of what our total bonus pool was, because that number 6 overall pick is very valuable. So this year we have one of the largest bonus pools, not because we're picking super high, but because we have so many picks. Have it here on a document somewhere. Let me scroll down to it. Our bonus pool for the year is $662,000. It's $12,662,000. The first pick that we have, which is number 29 overall, is worth just over $3 million. And then we also have pick 31 and 35, which is why it's so high. Their picks are clustered together, so those amounts are fairly equal to each other. And then you're allowed a 5% overage, which would push us to almost $13.3 million, about $5,000 less than that. So that's what we have to spend overall on the draft, with the exception of in the rounds 11 through 20, all the picks are valued the same. So you can pay those players that you draft, I believe is going to be $175,000 this year. Do not quote me on that. Last year it was $150. The year before that it was $125. So I'm finding the pattern and assuming that that's going to work.
Makes sense. Seems like to fit the trend.
Yeah. Also, the final pick of the 10th round that the Rangers will have is $178,000. That's what it's valued at. So 175 feels correct. Yeah. So you can sign those guys for that amount of money or less. Doesn't matter. If you go over that amount of money, it counts towards your bonus pool. So that's where I call it, you can get funny with the money. And so if you can take a guy that you know will sign for less than your $3 million that you have with your first pick, say he only signs for $1 million, then you have $2 million to then spread out and spend how you would like. Teams do this all the time. Generally, it gets talked about the most with a team that has the first 5 picks in the draft overall. So you'll see it a lot with Cleveland as we get closer to the draft. People are going to talk about it. Cleveland is a notoriously cheap team. Their ownership group is awful. We all complain a lot about our ownership, good or bad, warranted or not. I'm not going to comment on that, but he certainly is spending this year. Cleveland is not, but they have that first overall pick, and there's a lot of talk that they will cut a deal to save significant money, like very significant money. I can potentially see them do it, but you don't get the number 1 overall pick often. In fact, Cleveland has never had it before. They're a very old club. They have the longest World Series drought in baseball. They have never had the number 1 overall pick. I can't see them getting super funny with the money. If they're taking a guy 1-1, they think he's the 1-1 talent. And they might just save some money doing it. But so if you save that money, you can reallocate it however you like. And it's not really like it's money that you get to save for the team. That's just your allocation. The team could spend $85 million on the draft if they wanted to. They would just pay ungodly fees for it. And they would lose tons of draft picks. To the best of my knowledge, as long as the bonus pool has been around, no team has ever gone over their 5% overage because it's such strict rules, which is good for the teams and for competitive balance. Not super great for the young guys, but give and take. But like I said, so like the Rangers did it a few years ago with a young pitcher named Brock Porter. He was a high schooler, arguably the best pitcher in the draft, probably was expecting to go in the top 10, didn't get taken in the top 10 picks. And after day 1, all the expert talking heads were saying, oh, well, he's going to college. He might be a number 1 overall pick in a few years. Actually, I think he would have been next year. And then with the first round on the second day, Texas Rangers took him in round 4. And then they paid him like a first round draft pick because they'd saved money with knowing who else they were taking in the draft, which is great for the team. If you can manage to get that done, that's fantastic. Most teams, especially in Arizona's position this year, will instead choose to take like a college player that maybe isn't actually the 29th best talent in the draft, but maybe he's the 36th So you can save significant money there, and then you can sign someone at 31 who probably should have gone at like 16 or 17 and just slip through the cracks and say, well, now we can sign you as if you were in that round, and you can get 3.5 million instead of 3 million like our value is.
I like that. It kind of gives a more of the front offices and kind of it's not just on their, scouting and like what they can actually see like in like players. It's, hey, you got to, like you said, you got to be kind of fun. If you want to be funny with your money, if you want to try to play around with the books a little bit, you can make it work. You can get, pretty sneaky if I still think the biggest key is the actual scouting, like knowing what you're looking for. But if you know what you're looking for and you can plan the money around it, then teams can make some pretty sneaky moves. Like you're saying with that Bryce Porter, that's pretty insane that a, potential top 5, top 10, arm in the draft in a few years, they went, hey, like if anything, I'm a player, I would want to sign. You're like, do you believe in me that much that you're like willing to give me, like you said, like top draft pick money, but you want to get me in the later rounds and like believe in me early, kind of like invest on the ground floor, like sign me up right away.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me, the money. I neglected to mention one of the new things with the draft combine is if a draftee goes to the combine, or for the College World Series guys, there's always some leeway. Basically, if they take a physical that the league accepts and shares that information with the teams, all 30 teams, they are guaranteed 75% of their draft bonus pool, or their draft pick allocation money. So if that's a $1 million value that's kind of arbitrarily assigned to that particular pick, they have to be offered $750,000 of it. So the team can only save so much with each pick now, which does kind of stop teams from getting too funny with the money. But it's there. It's another thing to protect the players because, look at Carlos Correa in free agency a few years ago. He signed with the Giants, except he didn't. Then he signed with the Mets, except he didn't. And the Twins were willing to take the risk on his injured ankle or whatever it is. A team drafting you at 18 is going to be more scared of that particular type of issue than someone, signing you at 27 or 8, whatever it is.
Yes, I do like the, players definitely deserve to be, especially the younger guys. Not every guy is going to make it to the majors. And if you are at a talent level at a young enough age to where you're even being considered like to be drafted, I definitely think you should at least have some kind of way to give yourself a little bit of like, hey, you've already put this amount of work in your time before most people probably even have an actual job yet. Yeah. Like you deserve some kind of, compensation for, all the hard work that you've done to even get to the level of being invited to a combine, to even be able to have scouts being like, hey, we want to like you said, we want to guarantee you're at least getting 75% of wherever you were drafting you. Doesn't mean we're going to draft you in the upper rounds or the lower rounds. We just want to at least say, hey, we want to know more about you as a player. But it's not like you said, that's not giving them the reason to, let me look at your physicals. Oh, this is what's wrong? Nope. Delete your number, block you. We're not even going to like contact your agent anymore. So it kind of avoids some of the younger players getting screwed. So I kind of like that.
And it helps out college seniors. Like I said earlier, they have like no bargaining power basically because they have no other options. So historically, teams would sign them for like $2,500. And if your draft pick was $1 million, that's a ton of money that you can spread out elsewhere. That can no longer happen if they've gone and done the physical. So they jump through that hoop and they guarantee themselves so much more money.
I like how they're trying to, kind of make it to where find that middle ground. Like, hey, teams, you can be smart with your money, but these are still human beings. Still got to treat them like actual people. So you mentioned earlier when we were talking about, some of the basics with the MLB Draft Combine and all that, that this year's draft is going to be closest to a normal one that we've had since 2020. But it's actually a somewhat weaker draft, especially compared to some of the other years. For me personally, like I know like some of the highlights I've seen, the names that I really know are, Jack Caglianone from Florida in college. And then one that I noticed that you had on your list of guys that you kind of have your eye on in the draft is Cam Caminiti from the Arizona High School, son of Ken Caminiti. He's been pretty solid in some of the stats I've been looking up. But other than those two, I'm not really familiar with some of the names in this draft. So I was a little bit curious on what And again, it's not like a slight to any of the guys. Like, it's still probably, like you said, the upper rounds are going to be pretty solid. But what makes it that the rest of the draft is somewhat weaker compared to ones in the past?
It's mostly just a group of players that are all flawed in some fashion that don't really stand out on top of one another. It's kind of just a mob of guys who are all very talented, far more talented than I'm ever going to be. But no one's really standing out. The ones that have stood out are the names that we all hear. The Travis Bazanas, the Charlie Condon, I think, Jack Caglione, Chase Burns, Hagen Smith, Cam Caminiti. Those are the names that you're going to hear early on in that first round while you're sitting there waiting or not even yet watching, because the Diamondbacks are going to pick 4.5 hours into their show.
Which is good. I'd rather have that happen every year, if I'm being completely
I would too, for sure. But so like that level of talent still exists. It's still there. You're still going to see them on top 100 lists. It's just by the time you get to the end of the third round or the first round where we do have those picks, 29, 31, and 35, you've got a bunch of guys who are potentials. And that's pretty common with every year. Outside of last year, there were just so many guys who were really good. And like the more you read, the more you watch and stuff, like you will have draft crushes. I remember in 2017, I had a draft crush on JB Bukauskas, who we actually ended up getting for Zach Greinke from the Houston Astros. And I was upset when we didn't take him. Lo and behold, 2017 is one of the weakest drafts in modern history, our lifetimes for sure, potentially MLB draft history. That's the year we took Pavin Smith. Like that should tell you all you need to know when Pavin Smith was a viable option where he was taken. And that's who he is. He's certainly gotten better this year, and last postseason, he's definitely endeared himself far more to me than he ever did in the past. But that's the type of draft. That is not what this draft is going to be, hopefully. But it is just a bunch of guys. Like if you look at a bunch of mocks, we have like a different name attached to us every single time because the experts don't know, the scouts don't know, the teams don't know. What do you want to take? Who's there? What's going to be there? What's valuable? What's not? Do we risk the high school pitcher who's likely to flame out but has the talent? Or do we go with the college guy that we think is almost guaranteed to make the majors but might not have an impact larger than Josh Rojas, or Kevin Cron or whomever? That's what teams are juggling around for this year. And I think it'll just be fascinating to see what happens. In general, when teams are confused, they take college pitchers. Because
was that the Angels, and were they just confused that entire draft when they just took like 15 pitchers in a row?
I don't think they confused it. I think they were desperate. They needed pitching. As far as I know, not much of that pitching has turned out, but that's the Angels. If there's a guy that is almost MLB ready, the Angels will take him from college. They've done it the last 2 years. Nolan Schanuel debuted within his draft year, which is just unheard of.
Insane.
And Zach Neto debuted 2 months before Schanuel did, less than a year before he had been drafted. I don't necessarily know that there is a guy like that in this draft, so maybe they'll actually draft a little more intelligently, but recently they have not been. They are, in my mind, the laughingstock of drafting, closely followed by the Colorado Rockies, who always take a hitter, and I understand that with Coors Field, but if you can't develop pitching, you should take a better quality pitcher in the first round, which they've been mocked a lot too this year, so maybe they will finally change the way that they do it.
Yeah, so you did mention, there are a lot of different names mocked the Diamondbacks. It seems like one of the only ones that I've seen, and I think the most I've seen it duplicated out of all of the different people with the mock is Walter Janik. And then Janik, sorry, apologies. Yannick, sorry, Walter Yannick. And then the other name on here that have, kind of jogged a memory is Tommy White. I see Carlos Collazo I think that was his third mock draft, had Tommy White going to us. And that's a name that, again, I just love power. I know that he hits tanks. So
yep.
And at least with it does make sense, like you're saying. It's not like there's the guaranteed, superstars like there was in some of the future draft or the past drafts where, there's those top talents that the first round is going to be loaded. And then there's some pretty serviceable ball players in the next rounds after. Is it going to be one of those where the first probably 15, 20 picks, you're going to see a lot of again, it's not going to be a guarantee. Mike Trout was picked 27th, and he's still probably the best baseball player that I've ever seen with my own two eyes.
Right.
So you never a full guarantee, but it seems like from at least, kind of what you're saying and some of the mock drafts and what some of the scouts are saying, that it is going to be kind of on the same par as you, just not the most, eye-popping, wow, light up the stat page kind of potential that you would have had in previous years.
Yeah, I would say, based on what I've seen from the mocks, and I've put quite a few together onto a spreadsheet for myself that I shared with you guys. The first 12 to 16 picks seem fairly set of like the names. They might go in a different order, especially after the top like 4 or 5. But generally those names, if you're seeing them in those, especially like the top 12, I wouldn't expect Arizona to get one of them. They are the tiers above where we are picking from. And that's fine. That's good. Those guys bust just as often as everybody else. And people from later rounds do well, like Mike Trout, Paul Goldschmidt, Brandon Webb. You can find draftees that are solid, excellent players deep in the draft. Corbin Carroll was pick number 16. Like, he was not the number 1 overall pick. It's just the way that it goes. So there are some names that I think we should all be interested in that we might actually pick on the high school side. If he's still there, I would be a little surprised if we don't take Slade Caldwell. He's an undersized outfielder from high school. We tend to like those. We've got Alec Thomas. We've got Corbin Carroll. Dalton Varsho was a college draftee, but he was very undersized. We turned him into an outfielder. But so it's something that the team has at least as a quasi strength. We've also have Jorge Barosa on the IL in the minors right now. I believe he was international, not a draftee. But same concept. Very small, very athletic guy. The team probably feels good that they can do something with him. Not sure that he'll make it, just because teams have seen Corbin Carroll now, so they all might want to make their own. Other ones to pay attention to: Kellon Lindsay, Wyatt Sanford. They're both shortstops, I believe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Braylon Doherty. He is a pitcher. He is likely to be there when we pick. I don't know that we'll take him. High school pitching is difficult to project. We took Blake Walston with the first round pick, and he's probably a reliever. So it's like the fact that he made it to the majors is impressive. Ryan Sloan is another pitcher. William Schmidt is an excellent pitcher. There's a good chance he's taken before he gets to us. He's basically second only to Cam Caminiti in the high school ranks. But again, high school pitchers scare teams. So he might be there for us, and we might shoot big. The college side, you mentioned Tommy White. He is big power. He also might not be there for us because that power tool does stand out. So some team might be like, yes, please give us him at 21 or whatever it is. Another guy to pay attention to is Vance Honeycutt. He fascinates me in the draft. He strikes out like no other. You may as well be Mark Reynolds. If he gets taken in the first round, he will set the record for strikeouts in his draft year for a first-round player.
Like strikes out more than Ivan Melendez, maybe?
Oh, God, I hope not. But yes, probably. But he's got a lot of tools. He's got loud tools. It's just, can he get the bat on the ball, which unfortunately in baseball is kind of an important question to know the answer to. So he might be there for us. He might not. Some team might be like, we can fix that and take him. Walker Yannick, we talked about, he's a catcher. I personally am hesitant to take a catcher in the first round. It's a very, very necessary position. No team is deep in catcher. If they are, they're deluding themselves. Look at the 2023 Toronto Blue Jays. They gave up Gabriel Marino and then immediately had problems with their catching core. Like, they could have used him. There's no such thing as depth at catcher. So it's shiny and it's there. But especially the Diamondbacks have never had success with an upper round catcher. Your best is maybe Chris Snyder. That's like as good as you're going to get, maybe.
Yeah.
So Malcolm Moore, Caleb Lomavita, and Walker Yannick are the top 3. People rank them. I've seen each of them ranked higher than the other 2. Just kind of your pick of the potato, which one you want. I personally will be a little disappointed on draft night if that's our first pick. But with 2 picks right after it, 20 minutes later, I could be very happy if we're saving money or something. And I could be completely wrong. Kalen Culpepper has been mocked to us a couple of times. He's a solid guy. He's not really going to inspire you. I was on a live stream for Snakes on the Diamond last year when we took Tommy Troy, and I described him as a black pick. He didn't excite me. I wanted Arjun Nimala, who went to the Blue Jays like 10 picks after us.
Ooh, he was pretty good.
Yeah, he was a high schooler. He was loud tools. I thought he was a very good player. He's turning out to be a very good player, at least in early going. But I mean, there's something to be said for a block player. If you can guarantee a floor, that's a pretty good MLB player. So don't be too disappointed if someone like that gets taken, like a Christian Moore or a Dakota Jordan. The most exciting or interesting pick is definitely Girangelo. His first name is Girangelo. His last name is spelled very interestingly.
Is it Kihinte?
I believe it is pronounced. Hang on, I've got it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to find
Sanja.
Wow.
I'm gonna call him Girangelo because I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He is a switch pitcher.
Oh, that's the guy. Okay, yeah, he looks. Okay.
And he's very interesting. He is a better right-handed pitcher, I would say, than he is a left-handed pitcher. But being left-handed will get you a little bit farther, just in general. And so he's very intriguing. Personally, he's not my favorite. I think he's getting a lot of hype because he's unique, and that's cool. I will not be disappointed if we take him, but I don't know that he's really the best available when we get to him. That said, there's a good chance that he's already off the board by the time we get there. The switch pitcher aspect, there's just a lot to talk about with him. He's interesting. Don't be upset if we take him. Be very intrigued to see how the team treats him. There's a good chance the team takes him and just says, you're right-handed pitcher now. We want you as a starter. But just the way you could use him is fascinating. And as always with the MLB draft, this is especially relevant for people who maybe are new fans because of the postseason last year. Don't expect to be seeing like a third baseman drafted because Eugenio Suarez isn't good. These guys are not going to be in the major leagues for a long time, even if they're college guys. So never draft for need. If you're drafting for need, I think it's kind of a wasted draft. And unfortunately, I think 2023 is going to turn into that. We took a lot of relievers, and don't get me wrong, they're good. We need the pitchers. We need the relievers. And they have some floor, but it wasn't an exciting draft for me. It was a lot of, okay, he's going to fill a need. And that's sometimes necessary. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a year for that. But I hope that's not what we do this year as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a few names from last year's draft. Like Caden Grice is having a really good year so far this year. I mean, Gino Groover, Tommy Troy, even Jack Hurley's been doing pretty solid, but there's definitely not, great point. Like, there's not too many names kind of looking back on it just off the name alone. Haven't really been hearing too much about them like in the minors this year.
They're not really lighting up the stat sheet. And to be fair, I'm not really talking about the Jack Hurley's, Grayson Hits, those top picks.
You mean like the Zane Russells, Casey Anderson, like Hayden Dirks, like Rio Britton, like some of the really late round ones where like it even shows the bonus pool goes like you were saying earlier, 150,000 to where the first pick for Tommy Troy, his bonus pool is almost 4.5 million, and then 1.7, 1.2. So definitely not the more exciting picks. And I'm 100% with you. I don't want to see them draft a catcher. I don't want to see another striker Trahan situation.
No.
Yeah, that I remember when we drafted him, I was like, oh, cool. Like Diamondbacks I think we had Chris Snyder at the time because that was the 2013, 2012.
Montero probably was our main one.
Yeah, so we probably had Montero, and I think he might have been like some of the last. Yeah, that was a 2012 draft, correct?
Yeah.
So I don't want to see a situation like him, but with the fact that they have multiple picks in a row when they finally do get to pick after 4 hours, it will be kind of interesting to see what they do. Like I wouldn't be upset with them taking the switch pitcher from Mississippi. Like that would be pretty good. It's just anything like that. It's fun. It's cool. It's something to kind of get fans more interested in the minor league ball. But I definitely have to do. I'm gonna look into Slade Caldwell a little bit. And then some of the other, like what was it? Trying to look for. There's one you pointed out. Oh yeah, Kalen Culpepper. Kalen Culpepper. Just the name alone kind of intrigued me. So, I'm gonna look into some of these names a little bit, and hopefully, any of the fans listening too, kind of prep yourself a little bit for the draft. Get into the draft more because the draft is actually genuinely fun. Like it's a pretty.
It's fascinating.
It's not the NFL draft or the NBA draft or even the NHL. So like again, these aren't guys. Like it's not like just out of high school or college free agency, which is kind of what some of these other drafts are, where like you're literally, if you just get good enough luck, you can pick these guys and they have almost immediate impact on your team. Baseball's not anything like that. Where if you can find some fun, get into the draft, it makes it fun because you can be like, heck yeah, woo.
Yeah.
Probably won't see you for 4 years, but good luck to you, shake hands and move on our way.
Yep.
But yeah, so it is good to know, like, a little more reasons why this would be considered a weaker draft. And you did mention a few names that caught your eye. Actually, no, I think you did a good job at just getting both those questions in one, so I didn't need to go to that one.
Some other names that I haven't talked about just because they're not there, so I haven't done the research. Like, they're not going to be there for Arizona. But you'll know them eventually. I mentioned Travis Bazzana already. He's Australian. He'd be the first ever Australian taking number 1. So that's pretty cool. Charlie Condon has power like no other. I can't see the Reds passing on him because Great American Ballpark and power is just perfect. But if they do pass on him, there's a good chance Colorado takes him because power in Colorado. Jack Caglione has been a two-sided player. He pitches and he hits. He's going to get taken as a hitter. His pitching days are probably over. But then, like, you've got Chase Burns and Hagen Smith and Cam Caminiti for other pitchers that are excellent. You'll hear their names very early. Connor Griffin, I got to listen to him be interviewed on the MLB Pipeline podcast a few weeks ago. He just struck me as a very mature guy for a high schooler. I think he has something that some teams are worried about. I forget what exactly it is. Don't expect him to be there for Arizona. But know his name. There's a good chance he will be a top prospect very soon that you'll want to pay attention to in someone's system. There's some guys who got hurt. Trey Savage had a lung issue. He's a college pitcher. I don't think it's going to be severe enough for him to fall to us, but if he does and we take him, that would be a steal. Braden Montgomery had an ankle issue, I believe, in the College World Series. Again, I don't expect that to affect his draft positioning at all. Instead of maybe going 4th, he'll go 8th. Like, yeah, it's a lot of money for him, but it has no bearing on us. Unfortunately.
Exactly, yeah.
But those are good for us to know and to pay attention to. And just long term, just because he's so unique, Durangelo is going to be fascinating to watch. If a team,
I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on him. I'm going to be like, just the entire time. It's going to be one of those where just please let his name be there. So then if we do skip out him, I can be, he wasn't there. They didn't want him, but it's just please let that name be there so I can give him a little bit of hope. Charlie Condon looks nasty though. You weren't kidding. I looked up his baseball reference numbers. 37 home runs in college this year. Is disgusting.
Yeah, he and Bazzana, there was like a week where each one of them would hit like 2 home runs in a game, and then the next day one of them would hit 3. So then he hit 2, and then he hit 4, and like they were going off on each other, and it's awesome. It's so cool to watch. I can't wait to see what they can do as professionals. They're likely the number 1 and number 2 overall picks. Whichever one ends up with Cincinnati at Great American Ballpark is going to be fascinating to watch at the major league level. And whoever ends up in Cleveland, it's a beautiful park. They need some thump in their lineup eventually. It could be awesome. Like, they could learn from Jose Ramirez. Like, who better do you get to learn from? So
one if not the top 3 third baseman in baseball right now.
Right. Like, definitely a Hall of Famer. So it's just fascinating. I love the top of the draft as much as I love wherever we pick and whoever we take.
Heck yeah. So I guess to kind of get things more, now that we've definitely covered some of the basics, who to look out for, and all that, like, comparing this draft to previous years, to get more D-backs centralized, looking at your spreadsheet of D-backs history, and again, just want to emphasize this, 10 out of 10 work. I noticed that Ian Raban took over as the director of the draft in 22. Yep. The draft picks from the previous director of the draft, Derek Ladnier. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that.
I've never actually heard it pronounced, so I always say Ladnier, but I don't know.
Ladnier. Okay, so I guess I can just go by Derek. Came to fruition to really help the MLB club. Obviously, Corbin Carroll, like we mentioned earlier. You really can't judge an MLB draft just off of a few years after it takes these guys time to develop, especially if you're getting these guys in high school. How do you feel about the job that I put Ladnier in the thing, but how do you feel about the job that Ian Raban has done so far with his short term of being the director of the Diamondbacks scouting and drafting?
He's interesting. So I liked his 2022 draft mostly because I loved Drew Jones. I wanted Jones from the first moment that we knew we were going to be picking one or two. I got enamored when I started looking at the draft with the Toronto Blue Jays system. They had Kevin Biggio, they had Bo Bichette, they had Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Those are all legacy players, and they were looking really good. Now, it hasn't really translated for them, unfortunately, but like I wanted that. I wanted that kind of thing. So Drew Jones, to me, he was my draft crush. I was very excited to get him. Obviously, he got hurt. Then he was not very good. He's starting to potentially pull out of that this year, but there's still some questions about his swing, apparently. I'm not the person to ask about that. He steps in the bucket. I don't fully understand what that means. There are better people to learn about that from if that's what intrigues you. So that pick is looking okay. I think if he hits, he's going to hit huge, or he could bust. And frankly, that's what I would rather have in a draft. Go for the high-end talent, because if they hit, you're gold. And if they bust, you can defend what you did. But if you go for the floor and they bust, what were you aiming for? A one-war player? Like, cool, why did we want that? At least we didn't get a negative war player, I guess. After that came Landon Sims. He was a super exciting injured arm. I was pleased to get him. There were some other names that I would have preferred. I also think the team kind of dragged their feet trying to make him a starter, but he is a full-time reliever now, and I think he will shoot through the system. He may even get a promotion like early next season to the MLB. And he's kind of like a Justin Martinez, except a little more polished. Ideally.
I like the sound of that. Just off of
right. If we could have the two of them going back and forth with each other, that'd be awesome. I was personally not a fan of the Ivan Melendez pick on draft day. I understood it. It was defensible. We had a nice long break in draftees, like in draft positioning. So we thought he was going to be gone by our next one. So you take him early. Probably saved a little bit of money on him. Great. He's not going to make the major leagues. If he does, I think he's going to be the next Kevin Cron, Seth Beer. He's going to come up. He might hit a big bomb or two. And then you'll look, all of a sudden he's striking out 50% of the time. It's unfortunate. I hope he makes it. I hope he makes me a fool, and I can buy his jersey, get him to sign it, and like it'll be amazing. I just don't see it. But you've got Dylan Ray in that first draft. Like, he went big, he aimed large, and for the most part, it's looking okay. I don't know how to pronounce this one's last name, but Spencer Geisting or Geisting.
I think it's Geisting. Yeah.
Pick. He's one of those guys that we got funny with the money to sign. He got a lot more money than guys around him should have gotten, in theory.
4,000 in that slot pick is pretty insane. That's almost like double, or that's more than double what those guys were getting.
It's more than triple. Should have been getting. But like, he's looking really good right now. So like, that's cool. That's awesome. Then we get to 2023, and the top of the draft, again, I don't really have any problems with. Tommy Troy, bleh pick, but like, he serves his purpose, and I think he's going to be a pretty good player if he can get it all figured out with his ankle and injuries and everything. Gino Groover looks very exciting. Hayden Grice looks very good. Jack Hurley's looking pretty good. Grayson Hitt was pretty cool. Kevin Sim is another legacy player, although I believe he's a Korean legacy player.
I wondered why his name sounded so familiar.
Yeah. Don't quote me on that, but he has some connection to the game that's through a dad. So like the top of last year's draft, pretty cool, pretty good. The rest of it, like I said, from rounds 9 through 18, we took pitchers, and they're almost all relievers. And that's fine, because we definitely needed it, and you need some drafts like that. You need the floor. You just need to fill in the grouping. And, I mean, Hayden Dirk is looking pretty good out of that grouping. And if we end up with even half those picks making the major, half of those picks making the majors as relievers, that's pretty great. Just making the major leagues is an impressive feat for any player and any scouting director. Rebhand, we obviously need a lot more data to see. I don't know that I think he's going to end up as like some top scouting director in the way that I think Derek Ladnier is. Ladnier's picks are just, his drafts are just fantastic. There's no other way to look at it. Like, he's tracking to be so good. Like, I mean, you take Dansby Swanson, yeah, Arizona didn't get anything out of him at all, but he's a good player.
That was not his fault, at least.
Right, that's a GM issue. But you've got Corbin Carroll, you've got Trey Jameson when he comes back, you've got Ryan Nelson, you've got Slade Ciccone, you've got Brandon Pfaadt, you've got man, I have a whole long list here. Who else did he get us?
I mean, you got Varsho, who's turning out to have a really solid bounce back for the Blue Jays.
You got Ginkel, Varsho, McCarthy, Thomas, Blaze. The 2019 draft alone was Carroll, Walston, Jameson, Nelson, Henry, both the Dominics, Fletcher and Canzone, Saul Frank, whose career is probably over in my estimation, but I mean, he made the majors, he made a splash. There was a young high school pitcher we took named Brennan Malone that year. He was
traded for Starling Marte, correct?
Yep. He has not worked out, but he got a Starling Marte, which is no small feat. Say what you will about what we got back for Starling Marte. Certainly not the shining example of an excellent trade. But that's just the 2019 draft. So then you've got 2020 with Pfaadt and Jarvis and Ciccone. And then you still have Lawler and Adrian Del Castillo, Jacob Steinmetz, Ryan Bliss. They're all percolating up through the matriculating up through the minor system. Ryan Bliss was used to get Seawald. I think that's fascinating. I was one of the people who was very disappointed to see him included in that trade, but I get it. That's the cost of getting a guy like Seawald. And I can't wait to follow his career in Seattle. So I think Ladnier is going to be a top scouting director for us. I don't know that he'll be like number one by WAR or whatever, because you're competing with Scherzer and Goldschmidt. I don't know that Carroll is necessarily going to match either of their careers. Asking for that is absolute insanity. But the sheer number of guys who are likely to make some version of an impact on the major leagues, very impressive for Ladnier. I don't know that Rebhand is going to have that lasting effect, but he did study under Ladnier. He was promoted directly, like he was assistant and became promotion directly. So he's learned from him. Hopefully that will start to show some fruit in the next few drafts.
Yeah, I think, I fully agree with you. Like you said, it's a little too early in his, resume to really like fully, kind of pinpoint, think of like, really grade how he's done with some of these drafts. Because again, it's been two. It's been the 2022, 2023. Like you said, I really do like how aggressive he went in the 2022 draft. The Melendez one, like again, you know more about like drafting, prospecting, so I fully understand like. Even looking on it now, like Ivan Melendez this year alone already has like 67 strikeouts. He's just a swing and miss machine. It is rough. But at least, Golden Spikes winner. Like I think he had the most home runs in Texas. It's one of those where, like you said, pick number 43. Like there's you can get him pretty under money. Like I understand why they did it. And then even the 23 draft. I think this year personally, like you're with the combination of how you're mentioning it's a little weaker. I think if he can. Make they're playing with the money, however they want to get with like, they're slotting in certain picks, and then just however they can manage to get the most out of these picks, whether they get more high schoolers or college. I think this will be the first key, maybe not the first, but one of the bigger key drafts to, in like 3 years, you can look on like the turning point. Like, did he fully turn around? Did he start to hit have more hits than misses in this one? Or is it kind of like one of those where, you get like 2 players out of like the 20 that actually end up making the major leagues?
Hey, 2 out of 20, if they make an impact, that's still not that bad.
Yes, it depends. If it's a good impact, if it's an impact that like, it can actually help the team, I'm okay with it. But if it's one of those like a Randall Delgado kind of impact, like I know we didn't draft him, but just kind of like that, they're going to come up and they're not really going to do anything. Like if they're just here just to eat innings, that's where I'm like.
Yeah, I mean, there's Randall Delgado is actually one of my favorite players. Not like somebody that I'll put on like a long
to not
list,
mean to disrespect Randall Delgado.
No disrespect. Just he served such an excellent purpose and a role that very few pitchers can actually serve. Of, hey, you pitched a couple days ago in relief, but now we need you to be the starter. And it wasn't in the era of the opener where he was only going to go 3 innings. Like, he would give you 4 to 5 every time. Were they pretty? No, we knew that. It wasn't a time where we were legitimately trying to compete. Like, he served a role that, frankly, not many players could serve right now. It's the role that I want Tommy Henry to eventually take, but I don't know that he can do it. We have a lot of pitchers like that right now, and I don't know that they're built or have been trained to do that kind of role. But you look at it, and the 2002 draft is in the smack dab center of Rizzo's tenure as our scouting director. He's currently the GM for the Nationals, and he combined all major league value was 8.3 B-WAR. F-WAR, sorry. 5.4 B-WAR with a 6.9 average between the two for the entire draft. Yet, he's our best scouting director because he got Scherzer and he got Webb and he's got a bunch of other solid, good guys, and he was there for a while.
Yeah.
So, like, you'll find that early on, you have some rough patches. You have some rough drafts. They're not necessarily your first or your second, but generally speaking, early in your drafting career with Arizona, you're going to have some duds of a draft. So if that ends up being 22 and 23 are his worst drafts, and then all of a sudden 24 through 28, we end up with solid returns, great. That's awesome. He's completely changed his legacy. Right now, it's not looking super hot for him. But so long as he doesn't do 2014, where across the board it's a negative value draft for us, I'll take it.
Yeah, say that. I remember being pretty hyped about the Tukey draft for that one. Not gonna lie at all.
Good prospect.
Yeah, I know. Like, especially the name. Like I said before, I'm very partial to any kind of pitching. Like, if I see a pitcher's drafted, I'm instantly like, oh, what kind of stuff did they have? And I really liked what he had. Yeah, definitely did not pan out. And to the point about Mike Rizzo being our best, not only with Scherzer and Goldie, but he drafted Upton. He drafted and Micah Owens had a pretty solid, 2 more year that he got Steven Drew. Like you said with Mark Reynolds, it's pretty hard to, especially with this team really not having the greatest success. Like, we don't really hit 5 WAR players in drafts like Steven Drew, Mark Reynolds, so these like Max Scherzer, Paul Goldschmidt. Like, those are the kind of the outliers. Most of the at least what I'm kind of noticing looking through some of these. Is there's a lot of 2 to 5, which again is still very good. I mean, you're helping the team in some positive way. So I'm not saying that's bad, but it definitely is one of those, comparing it to how it's gone since then. Yeah, there's definitely been a few weak drafts, and I really hope that Raban can avoid kind of doing that again this year.
Me too.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the nice thing is, at least I think. I mean, I guess I can't even fully say our depth has definitely taken a hit. I mean, we've seen why we're no longer a top 5 farm system, because a lot of the reasons why we were top 5 have either graduated or have been traded to other teams like Brian Bliss, things like that. So a little understandable. So hopefully this kind of gets us back on track, but it's not like we have the the super guarantee, especially drafting later in the rounds.
Right. It's all at this point. It's all going to be what your development process looks like, which is hit or miss under Hazen. Some people love it. Some people hate it. I think he's done better in general than past GMs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's meeting the expectations relative to his peers in the major leagues. A larger project I would love to do is to have this type of document for every team to see all of their draft picks, who they ended up with, and what kind of value they're getting out of their drafts. That's a huge undertaking that I don't know. I'll probably be 95 before I finish it, but I think at that point, then you can really look at it and be like, oh, wow, this was a huge weakness for us. Or, wow, we're a lot better than we thought, and we're just too harsh on our own team because we're too close to the issue to actually understand, the breadth of what it actually looks like. So I think it's interesting. Like I said, I love the draft. I love finding out who we're going to take. I love watching them come through the system. I even pay attention to guys that I wanted us to take that are in other systems still, like Arjun Nimala last year. I'm going to keep an eye on him for a while. It's the same thing. I loved Dalton Varsho. I didn't expect him to be the one that we traded. I was very disappointed when he was traded until I saw what we got back, and then I was very excited. But I still follow his career. He's on my fantasy teams. He's I follow our players because I get attached to them. And it doesn't matter if they're not yet our players or if they're never going to be our players. Travis Bazzana fascinates me. I think Condon has more power, but I think Travis Bazzana might end up being the better player. And that's going to be fun to watch for me, especially here in Ohio if they're the top 2 picks. So
yes, if you can actually physically go to the stadium, pay money to watch those kind of players play.
Oh yeah,
can't miss it.
Team here, Columbus Clippers, they feed into Cleveland. It's fantastic. I get to see all of their players, and it's $12 to sit right behind home plate. It's just that's phenomenal.
And imagine you actually have some pretty good weather over there too. Maybe minus the humidity, but probably or so. Yes, and that's the like you're saying, it's fun to just pay attention to these guys whether they come to your team or not. And that's what I've definitely in the last 5 6 years tried to get more of. Again, I'm still gonna it's tattooed on me. I'm always gonna be a Diamondbacks fan. They're gonna be my main team that I focus on, pay attention. Yep. But I'm trying to get out of my even the Dodgers are gonna be the one last team that I can't do it for. But I'm trying to get out of my hater arc and go more of just being yes, I'm a Diamondbacks fan, but I'm more of a baseball fan, enjoying the sport as a whole. Because when the entirety of the sport is good, we're all feasting. Yes, it sucks that Shohei Ohtani has to be a Dodger, but just for baseball's marketability and the reach it has, it's
perfect.
It's perfect. It's fantastic. It would have been either that or the Yankees. So I, as a more trying to get more into just being a general baseball fan, there are a lot of names in here that I do agree. I like to keep tabs on, kind of watch throughout the years, even Spencer Torkelson. I like him just because he went to ASU. I check up on him every now and then, see how he's doing. Even just with playing MLB The Show, some of these guys that I see get drafted and they get a prospect card, I'm like, oh, I remember that guy in MLB The Show. I'll keep some tabs on him throughout the year. So yeah, it's just a little more fun, a little more you don't have to only be so doom and gloom about your team or only focus on your team. You can kind of get out of just the Diamondbacks bubble and go what are other teams got going on? Yeah,
I agree completely. It's fun. Okay. I'm definitely a Diamondbacks fan first, but it's a very close second to be a baseball fan. And I've learned that from living outside of Arizona. If I want to follow baseball or go to a game, I had to go watch the Royals. No one wants to watch the Royals, so you go to the Cardinals. I detest the Cardinals, the worst fan base in baseball. But that's what you have there, so you get it. Then I come to Ohio where there's 2 other teams. I'm very spoiled. I'm 3 hours away from Pittsburgh. I'm only 5 hours-ish away from Chicago, 7 hours away from Milwaukee. I can get to a lot of games, and so I just want to see good players do excellent things. And hopefully see that on my own time, and when the Diamondbacks come to town, watch them fall on their faces. So we get the win.
Heck yeah. So as long as they're doing it good and playing well against every team but us, I'm okay with it. Before we move on from Rabon and all that, like we talked about, very small sample size, and we don't have this year's upcoming draft to really use that into the equation. So maybe in a month or so, once this draft is kind of finalized, actually probably more like a year. Actually, no. Once the draft's finalized and we know who they pick, we could probably circle back on this question. But out of his 2 drafts so far, of the names that you see, who do you kind of pick out as, whether it's the big name like the Tommy Troys, or if there's a later guy, who do you feel has the best chance, whether it's for the Diamondbacks or just any team in the MLB, to come up and have a really solid impact for the major league level?
From 2022, the name that will always stand out is always Drew Jones. I really hope that he puts it all together. I don't know that we'll see the fruits of that until maybe next year, where he maybe has his own Jackson Holiday type rise. I think the name to pay attention to for fans of the team that want to see what's going to happen in 2024, 2025, and 2026, look for Landon Sims. Like I said, we kind of kept him as a starter for a little longer than I think we should have. We seem to have changed our tune on that, and he is going to be a reliever only at this point. And I think he's finally putting it all together after having Tommy John in his draft year. And he will fly through the system. You could be seeing him getting his chance to prove that he deserves late innings April of next year if everything goes perfectly for him. Later in that draft, Spencer Geisting, I believe, he's making his impact right now in the minors. He's probably still a few years out, but it's a name to at least keep an eye on. The rest of them, I love the name Andrew Pintar, and he's been having a pretty good year before he got hurt. Dylan Ryan has electric stuff. If he can put that all together, that would be cool. But those are still pretty big ifs right now. From last year, I would love to see a full season of healthy play from Tommy Troy. He was pretty impressive post-draft when he was making his impact early going of last year. Like late season for us, but like early for him as a professional. And he was nursing an injury in his foot. Like, he was very impressive despite having an injury. And then, of course, I got all excited for him this year, and he immediately had a hamstring issue, just like everybody else in the system did. So I would love to see a healthy season from him. I think he could be a really fast riser, and he could make his impact pretty quickly. Gino Gruber is another really exciting guy that I like. Jack Hurley is intriguing. Some other names here, which is the one I wanted to point out. Oh, Hayden Dirk. Burn City Sports, Michael McDermott over there did an interview with him about a week or so ago. He's one of those relievers that we took in the later rounds, and he's certainly having the best season out of all of them. So he's kind of interesting to look at. And I'll just be interested to see, of the litany of names that we took in a row that all have a picture, a little P next to their name, just to see who makes it. But right now, for me, it's the top of the drafts that intrigue me the most. The Jones, the Troy, the Gruber, and the players who were capable of being taken earlier than they were, like Geisting.
Yes, I think Geising is definitely the later ones that is really, especially this year, seeing the jump he's made, because I think he got promoted from high A to double A, if I'm not mistaken, because I know Visalia is low A, the Hops are high A, and then so I believe he got promoted to double A after a really solid start to the season. And I'm sorry I said it twice today. I love me some pitching. I especially love me a good lefty. Like, that's why when Patrick Gordon was coming up and when he was starting to figure his stuff out, oh man, I tuned in. I mean, I tuned in for every start, but I especially was like, okay, I'm tuning in like 30 minutes early just so I can see him warming up, like all of that. So I guess transitioning from some of the names, the ones that we haven't really seen in the MLB yet, that we're kind of hoping and we think that would be really good, productive players on the MLB roster. When I was going through your Excel spreadsheet, there was definitely some nostalgia bomb names that I forgot about, like the Doug Slaytons, the Dan Ugla. I always forget that we even drafted him. And then even though he really didn't do too much for us, Mike Bolsinger is just a name. I don't know what it is about it. I think that was during the era of when we were bad blood with the Dodgers. So that's probably what it comes to me. And then
Bolsinger,
some of the names.
Anderson had a good romance going.
Yeah, Chase Anderson.
They were like each other's best man, like 3 months apart or something. The team really, they did a lot of exposés on him. And they were both good prospects at the time. Neither one really, well, that's not fair. Bolsinger never really figured it out. Anderson has had a very nice, long career. Not a very great career, but he's stuck around. That's impressive. I think that's probably why he stands out.
That makes sense. Yeah, like, honestly, because it's one of those names where I was like, why is Mike Bolsinger's name standing out to me? But it definitely did. So from names like that, or guys, I mean, me personally, that I just either didn't know that we drafted, or just thought that maybe like we got them a different spot. Ross Ollendorf, love, just such a baseball name. Chris Carter, slugger, I believe he came up and made it on the Astros or the Athletics at some point as well. And then Rusty Ryle. Those are just names that, again, I don't know, I just love them. There's some baseball names that I just trigger that, wow, like, I know that name. I never in 100 guesses would have ever predicted that they were a Diamondback at any point in their future. So is there any of those names that, like, you kind of had that same feeling with, like, whether it's a nostalgia or you kind of, like, when you're going through putting the doc together, that you went, you had to double check, like, did we draft that guy?
Not so much, just because all the historic ones that I wasn't really paying attention to at the time, I just kind of dumped from various resources, mostly Baseball America. But I think, and I maintain it, so, like, I'm familiar with those names. Like, until they retire, I'm checking to see where they're playing. Should I retire them off this list because they've moved to Korea and they've been there for 6 years? Or are they still toiling in someone's minor league system, maybe going to get, like, their chance at a cup of coffee? So I don't necessarily have those names where I'm like, wow, we drafted that one, just because I've been so close to it. But I think in the long run, for a lot of fans, and history will forget, that we drafted Max Scherzer, that we drafted Trevor Bauer, that we drafted Wade Miley, Dan Ugla, Keon Broxton, names like that made their impacts, but they made them on different teams. Obviously, Scherzer stands out. He's the one that we let get away. We got Ian Kennedy for him. We certainly won the trade in the early going and lost it in the long run. Sometimes that happens. Trevor Bauer, you can argue that we let go. We didn't get his best years from him. I would say that we didn't want that ego in our clubhouse. So even if the why we moved him was not great, I think the result was probably okay. Wade Miley, that's the one where I'm like, I can't believe people are going to forget that we drafted him. But he certainly has made his impact with different teams as a very good pitcher. And then I think the biggest what if we're going to have is that 2014 negative value draft, just because you've got your Tuki Toussaint, you've got your Isan Diaz, and just all of them. Like, it's a weird draft. It was Montgomery's last draft. It was right at the start of Tony La Russa and Dave Stewart's just horrible handling of the team. So there's so many different people you can point to and decisions that were made that you're just like, oh my God, how did this happen? But like, it's a huge what if. Like, what if we instead had gotten every good player in that draft instead of all the ones that busted? That could end up completely changing the face of the franchise. We may have extended Paul Goldschmidt another time or traded Paul Goldschmidt to get other players that matched that 2014 drafts window. Like, you never know. So I think that will go down as the big what if. And I think the names like Miley, Ugla, Bauer, Broxton, those are the ones that people are it's going to be a trivia question, went into the Hall of Fame as a national, well-known for the Detroit Tigers, who drafted Max Scherzer. And some table is going to be like, we know this one. Who else going to get it wrong? Like,
yeah, this one, I mean, I think they definitely are more well-known for being a Diamondback, but to me, especially when I found out about it years down the line, like you said, you wish you could always draft the best guys. Yep. The 2009 draft, I mean, the Diamondbacks' first pick, oh, what a banger. Bobby Borchering, love it.
Such a prestigious career, just excellent.
Yeah, dude, amazing 0-0 career WAR. I don't even think he made the majors.
Never made the majors.
No. Yeah, never made the majors. But then that was their 16th overall pick in the draft. And then the immediate next pick in the draft at number 17, they took AJ Pollock. I know, for anybody that doesn't know, the 2009 draft was the same draft for the Los Angeles Angels. It took Mike Trout, I believe, 24th or 27th.
7th.
Yeah, like some pretty late in the draft because, and again, that's the beautiful thing about the draft is Mike Trout wasn't like projected at the time where AJ Pollock was. Like that's how the draft systems work and all the mocks and all that. But man, when you can go back and look at it, especially with the bad taste in our mouths as fans that AJ Pollock kind of left us with, that's where if we could go back in time and take out the butterfly effect, because who knows, if we draft Mike Trout, maybe he's not Mike Trout, and we as baseball fans are robbed of an absolute generational talent. So I'm glad it worked out the way it has currently. But if we could have just had Mike Trout in the desert, oh man, that would have been.
Imagine though, like, what if at 16 we take AJ Pollock and we just get rid of Borchering? No one wants it. Take Pollock. 17 we take Mike Trout, and then however many picks later at 246 we get Paul Goldschmidt in the same draft. Like that would have
probably been
absolutely insane.
Like, if you go off of just the WAR alone, I mean, what Goldie with his 58 WAR, Mike Trout his 80-something WAR.
Yeah. Like, just absolute insanity. And, like, yeah, Pollock said a lot of things when he left that I certainly don't like. A lot of fans still hate him, and I think that's fairly justified. He understood what he was saying. He's not an idiot. But, I mean, he certainly played his role here. We got to experience his 2015 season. We got, like, if he weren't such a glass cannon, maybe we would have extended him. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of what ifs with all players, of course. But that 2019 draft, it certainly stands out as both a huge what if and a huge success story.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be one of those. Like I said, I'm always going to look back on that and be like, man, what if? Generational talent.
All the what ifs.
But seriously, I want to, thank you very much again, for kind of giving us the ins and outs, the meat, the potatoes, plus the actual recipe that goes into the MLB draft. And before we get out of here, I wanted to give you the floor again, kind of let us know and let the listeners know out there, what you have, coming up on the Snake Pit. I know you mentioned earlier, the days and whatnot that you do the recaps. Also, maybe some of your thoughts on the team's performance early on in the season, what you like, what you don't like, and then maybe what you would kind of look for them to do at the trade deadline, depending on how they do in the next month or so.
Yeah. I don't necessarily have any like interesting articles coming out. I did my big draft ones last year. I don't feel like those really need to be updated every year. It's cool, and obviously when Corbin Carroll has his 10-war season that we're all hoping happens someday, then maybe that's the year that I shirk my every third year of updating that one. This offseason, I might do another prospects one because most of the guys that I talked about last time have left the system in some fashion, whether it's trades or busted out or are on the major league roster. So maybe that will come at some point. For a little while, I took over Pit Your Wits on Saturdays from I'm Still Hungry 95 or Ish 95, as he's generally called on the pit. I highly recommend you go there every weekend. Great articles, great fun, just like this happened in baseball. What would you do in this situation? And it's all sarcastic. It's all fun. It's all just good jokes. Highly recommend those. As for how the team has done this season, I would label it with unfortunate. You for unfortunate. I was worried about normal regression because we had unbelievable health. We had a phenomenal rookie season. Perdomo got hot at just the right times. Gurriel got hot when Perdomo was cold. Like, we had everything just gelled, except for that 1 month-ish where Marino was hurt and everything fell apart. So I was worried about that. Never in a million years did I think we were going to lose 80% of the rotation basically before the first month of baseball was over. So just unfortunate. I want the injured guys to come back. I want them to come back healthy. Don't rush them. I am a huge proponent of, if we have to punt on 2024 so the 2025 can be epic, do it. It sucks if that means that we're going to watch Christian Walker get traded. It's unfortunate if that means that we have to watch a prospect go with Eugenio Suarez to get his money off the books. But maybe that means that Blaze Alexander can take over third and finally figure out all of his defensive problems. I'm very much of that mindset. That is a secondary goal. My goal is get our healthy guys back and go on a run. I don't care if we're the third wild card again. Get us in the postseason. Be there back to back for the first time since, 23 years ago?
0102.
Yeah. So I don't want a deadline sell-off, but I want Mike Hazen to make the right decision, whatever that needs to be at the time. And I trust that he can do it. And then for the deadline, assuming that we maintain what we're doing right now, relatively 500, still at least in the mix of everything else. Like I said, our injured players are where our big stuff's going to come from. We don't really have the prospect capital to go out and grab somebody. We certainly have it. You could trade Drew Jones. You could trade Jordan Lawler. You could trade Tommy Troy. You could trade Yu-Min Lin. There's a lot of guys you could get rid of. I don't think the team can afford to do that and have their window be open beyond Zach Gallen's tenure with the team. So I want floor guys. I want another Tommy Pham. For positions, obviously I want a third baseman, but they're rarely available. A backup catcher would be awesome to replace Barnhart. I'm not a huge believer that Adrian Del Castillo is a catcher in the long run. I also am not a fan of bringing up a guy who's never seen Major League pitching before to only play once or twice a week. That's just asking for problems. He's never going to learn. But catchers almost never get traded at the deadline. It's really rare. But if they're going to, it's going to be a backup guy. So fingers crossed maybe that happens. And then a bullpen move. I would like to see another Paul Sewald type deal. I just am a little worried at this point if we do that, that cost is going to be Blaze Alexander. And I don't know that I'm willing to part with that. I think I am until the moment it happens, and then I'm going to be heartbroken. So Same. That's what I would like to see, but I don't want to see, if there's a rumor that we're going after, Garrett Crochet or Luis Robert Jr., no, I'm sorry, I don't want that. Unless you're going to take, Spencer Geisting, and, that's your centerpiece, which, good for you if you're that happy about getting him, but I don't think that's what they're worth. So let the Padres and the Dodgers drain their system to get those types of players. Get me the Tommy Pham. I want that guy because I think that can make everything come together and just work. Torrey has that clubhouse designed for that type of upgrade.
Yeah, honestly, make a lot of great points. There's especially if they need to, it's not like a fun thing to say, but if they need to kind of punt on this season to still make sure that their window and their, continued success stays open, like, yes, we made the World Series. Yes, we want to continue. We want to get back to the playoffs every year. We want to win the World Series every year, but you don't want to destroy everything they've been building to just to try to get back to the postseason. And like, you never know. Like, you don't know. You could build an entire roster that's good for the postseason, and as we saw last year with the Diamondbacks, an 84-win team that's not necessarily built for the postseason can get hot and can eliminate every other team except for, obviously the last one.
The other young hot team.
Yeah.
Like, my biggest fear is that we're going to be the Suns. Now, I'm not an NBA fan, but there's no basketball team close to me. Like, I would say I'm a larger WNBA fan because of Caitlin Clark than I am of any particular, like, NBA team. But I obviously know about the Suns because I'm on Twitter. Like, I follow the Diamondbacks, which means I get a bunch of information about the Suns. They had a fantastic run to the finals that they lost. And then they traded a bunch of guys to get these big names. And frankly, like, from an outside perspective, like, they don't look good anymore. They look embarrassing. And so, like, I don't want the Diamondbacks to do that. And I trust that we won't. Like, under previous ownership, leadership, things like that, yeah, that would be a bigger worry to me. That just doesn't strike me as Mike Hazen's way. But what worries me more about Mike Hazen is that he's going to be gun shy, and he's not going to be able to make that move when he needs to. So We'll see. It's a line that I'm very glad I don't have to make the decision on. I just get to sit on my couch and yell at the TV. So
exactly. That's we're not making the millions or the hundreds of thousands per year, but like you said, we don't have to make those decisions that they probably lose sleep over at night. So I'm okay with that. 100%. But Spencer, seriously, thank you very much. I know this has been probably a longer episode than I imagine anybody listening to, and even myself would have imagined. But me personally, this was a very informative episode. I learned a lot about the MLB draft that I didn't know about before. Especially, I'm going to be going into probably in the next week before, or the next few weeks before the draft happens. Definitely gonna try to dive in and just get to know a lot more some of these names and whatnot.
I recommend MLB Pipeline. They're a little biased because they're MLB's prospect grouping, but Jim Callis and Jonathan Mayo are their two big ones. They've got other guys. Sam Dykstra, I think, is who does the Arizona lists for them. They're excellent. They have a podcast that comes out on Tuesday or Wednesday every week, depending. Just excellent voices, really easy to approach. You mentioned Carlos Collazo. He's with Baseball America. He's excellent as well, but Baseball America is behind a paywall, so
worth it 100%. If I'm being completely honest,
definitely worth it. I pay for it, but not everybody can afford it. Not everybody's willing to do that, so I try not to say, "Oh, he's the absolute best." Pipeline's the most approachable, and then from there you can kind of decide who to give your money to, going off of it. But like I said, I think the draft is fascinating, and I sincerely hope this is another 2014 or a 2017 draft. I would much rather it be 2019. It's what it's shaping up to look like. And I have my draft crushes already set, and I'm pretty confident we're not going to get a single one of them. But that's okay, because I'll be excited to learn about the guys that we do get.
Heck yeah. Well, again, thank you very much, Spencer. I really do appreciate you sitting down, setting aside this time to come here and educate me and some of our other listeners. Just a reminder for any of you guys listening, make sure you guys go follow Spencer. What is your Twitter at again, Spencer?
Oh, it's at Spencer O'Gara, but I never check the requests because it's all bots. Don't follow me on Twitter. Just
that's fair. Yeah, the most important thing, make sure you guys go to azsnakebit.com. Make sure you're, create an account, hop in the game day threads, especially right now. I know there's a game currently going on. Last I saw, the D-backs were up 4-0. So heck yeah, keep it going, boys. Yes. But yeah, so me personally, I'm probably gonna go hop in the game day thread after this. So make sure you guys head over there for the game day thread, the post game recaps, and just tons of content every day. There's multiple articles every day. Genuinely, if you're a fan of the D-backs especially, it's gonna be the website you're probably gonna visit the most, because it's already saved in my phone browser, my Opera, my Chrome at work, because I go to it so much there. So again, appreciate each and every one of you guys for coming through and listening to us. I've been your host, Brett. Spencer joined me here tonight from AZ Snakebit. We will have more episodes, not only with Spencer, but some more of the writers from AZ Snakebit. We're trying to get them some spotlight to, let them, like I was telling you with Spencer, that Excel spreadsheet alone deserves just like a 2-hour show alone. So
thank you.
Opportunities for them to come on here, show what they know, kind of help us learn a little bit more about the game and the team itself. So we always appreciate it, Spencer. I know all the viewers do as well. So seriously, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Always happy to talk the draft.
Heck yeah. And make sure you guys keep the notifications on, like, comment, subscribe, all that. And we will see you guys for our next series recap when we talk about the Diamondbacks and the Twins.
We'll be right back.